Huge oxygen emissions have been recorded in the northern sea route over the past 2 years. The reason for their appearance is still not known. With an increase in the oxygen level in the atmosphere, vegetation also increased significantly in size. In addition to rising fuel prices, changes in the environment have greatly changed society. The researchers said that huge emissions of oxygen could lead to new discoveries, including concerning the origin of life on Earth. An ordinary, average apartment. In the kitchen, husband and wife were talking to each other. "Darling, look." Min-jae sent this picture when she arrived in Gangwon-do. Here, a spider eats a bird caught in a web. Last time, she sent a photo of one of the giant mantis is eating a snake. "Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot what you're eating. You don't like bugs, do you?" I was slowly finishing my lunch. I recently found an article on the internet. It said something about a prehistoric atmosphere. The Earth's atmosphere is returning to its previous state, or something like that. After lunch, I got ready for work. "I'll be back soon," I said before leaving. "Bye. Hejin, Daddy's going to work," said the wife, communicating to her daughter that she was sleeping in the hall. "Quiet," I said. "She's sleeping." Honey?" my wife said to me. Turning around, I saw her gaze. Her gaze was clearly worried. Did something happen in the company? I froze for a moment, but then I gathered my strength and answered with a smile. "It's all right." And then he turned around and headed for the elevator. I should have kissed them both goodbye. If only I had known then what would happen. The evolution of humans went hand in hand with the extermination of the species standing in their way. But people didn't think about it. Everyone had only their own lives on their minds. Just like me. When I got to work, I immediately went to my boss. I knew that I would be told off. "Lee Kwajang. What the fuck is this? Are you an idiot? Or just dumb? Do you want to voice complaints from the technical department?" He didn't look very well. Apparently he doesn't like me. Nevertheless, he continued. "Do you understand that the board of directors wanted to kick you out?" I could barely talk them out of it. "Do you think I'm joking with you? How much longer do I have to cover for you?" Without betraying a drop of emotion on my face, I just humbly said. "I apologize. I'll fix it." "Of course you will fucking fix it. Did you think to put everything on the brakes?" He yelled at the whole office from his chair. "Get out of my sight." Still without emotion, I left the chief's office. It seemed even in the toilet they were discussing how I was being scolded. "Hey, did you hear Director Choi scolding Lee? Was it worth it? The guys from the technical department are constantly complaining." "Yeah. Choi Juicy is a real bastard. Do you know how he became a director?" The satellite navigation system, a work of art invented by our company, was actually developed by Lee. Choi took advantage of the fact that Lee was a very trusting novice and persuaded him to write off the development of the system for the entire department and then appropriated all the laurels for himself. Then why does Choi treat him like that? Turn on your brain. Lee stands in his way. Choi wants Lee to quit on his own. Lee is also good. Why does he put up with all this? With his knowledge? Well, there was one project that was funded by the government. Director Choi took it under the guise of Lee's name. Embezzlement was later discovered. Lee narrowly escaped criminal prosecution. Now he is branded a fraudster and has nowhere to go. But I think the director planned it all. Come on. Why would I? There is such a saying. In peacetime, medals are awarded to those who understand politics, not military affairs. This is also true for companies. More often, it is not the one who has reduced, but the one who is cunning who leads. That's why I'm licking Choi's ass. Ha. I think I'll join you. Like everyone else, I went out on the balcony for smoking. Except they all stayed as far away from me as possible. I searched my pockets for a while. And finally pulled out his pack of cigarettes. Damn, how evil they ended. I looked in the direction of other employees smoking nearby, but did not approach. This will only add to their problems. A little saddened, I fell on one of the chairs, here and there located on the balcony. There was nothing to do, so, as usual, I took out my wallet and began to look at the photo carefully hidden in it. The photo depicted me, my wife and little daughter. Photos of your family. I always look at them when it's hard for me. But suddenly, I was called. I was surprised because this does not happen often. A dark-haired, pretty girl, an employee of the department, stood in front of me and handed me a cigarette. "Thank you," I said, accepting the gift with a smile on my face. And then, with a slight sadness, he added, "You'd better go." "Why?" the girl asked with surprise. "Do you think I'm afraid Choi will get mad at me?" But a lot of people are really worried about you. Handing me the lighter, she continued to talk. They don't advertise it just because they are afraid of the director's anger. Do you know why Choi has been getting angrier lately? He's in trouble. He had reached his limit. To rise above one trick is not enough. Kwajin Nim, have you thought about it? You'll have a chance soon. What will you do? While doing another pull, I thought for a moment. And then he said with confidence. I have no idea. Suddenly, our conversation was interrupted by a siren and an emergency alert. Emergency message. Wasp-like creatures congregate around the company building. All personnel return to their jobs, for their own safety, I repeat. An emergency message. All personnel return to their jobs. What the hell? I thought aloud, directing my gaze to the sky. Is multiple OS so scary? I was still trying to see where the reason for the alert was. Is it really necessary? But I didn't have time to finish. I noticed them. Hundreds of thousands of wasps circled around the office building, and several of them came down to our balcony. Looking at this wasp, I have no reason not to believe in the urgency of this situation. A huge wasp, twice the size of a man, was looking right at me. Because of the number of these winged creatures, it seemed I couldn't even hear my thoughts. A continuous hum filled the air. Right a meter away from me, a creature the size of a bus was hovering. What the hell? I thought. Am I dreaming? It must be accumulated stress. Yes. Not otherwise. Interrupting in a state of shock, I didn't even react to the way the huge paws wrapped around me. And a second later, the sharp sting of the wasp entered my stomach like a sword. A moment and darkness in the eyes. Apparently, I lost consciousness. Strange. Eh? When I opened my eyes, I saw a ceiling with ventilation shafts. I was probably already inside the building. My first thought was, what the hell happened here? Did I pass out at work? Trying to get up, my head continued to be filled with thoughts that I had dreamed it all, but when I got up, I felt and heard a strange crunching. After that, I still lowered my head and noticed a terrible truth. In the place where I was stung by a wasp, eggs were already showing off. Damn, wasp eggs were growing on me. What the hell? Oh shit. Ah. After that, I noticed a terrible thing. The whole room was littered with corpses of people. On each of them, just like on me, maggots were growing. Huge eggs the size of a baseball bat. Squee squee. Hearing this strange sound, I turned around and witnessed a terrible picture. A larva hatched from the egg of a nearby corpse. This creature was huge by the standards of a larva, covered in terrible hairs. A real fear of insects. After that, she immediately crawled to the body and began to eat it. Damn it. Why is this not a dream? I shouted at the top of my voice. Suddenly, the egg on my chest also began to crack, with characteristic sounds. And a moment later the larva appeared. In fear, I threw her to the floor without hesitation and tried to tear off all the other eggs from my body. In the process, some of them also hatched. These creatures were clearly determined to devour me. One of them bit my hand. I got to my feet with screams and screams, in a state of shock. In a moment, all the larvae were trampled. Fortunately, they did not have a strong shell, so my leg easily coped with them. No matter how much I tried to wake up at least someone, it was useless. Get up now. Wake up. If you don't wake up now, you're all going to die here. I shouted, but it seemed they didn't hear me. They were probably either already dead or too exhausted to react. I even wanted to rip these eggs off them, but I quickly realized that these could not help them anymore. Suddenly, I noticed a window, apparently broken by the creatures that planted these eggs. It's decided, we need to lean out and call for help. What was my surprise that instead of a blooming and bustling city, I saw only ruins and nests teeming with various insects. Oh, my god. What happened? What happened to the city in which I lived? It seemed every building was plastered with the secretions of these creatures. The huge city seemed to have turned into a beehive. Yes, now it is clearly not a prosperous city. Falling to my knees, I was horrified. What should I do now? What should I do? My eyes were empty. There was nothing but despair and fear. Suddenly, in this infinitely terrible silence, I heard a click. No doubt, it's the click of the door opening. And after it, immediately a characteristic creak. Turning around, I really noticed a door opening. From afar I was sure it was a man. And indeed. A dead pale guy with a bunch of maggots on his back entered the floor like a zombie. Without thinking for a second, I shouted at the top of my voice. Hey. Are you alright? Immediately after these words, I ran up to him. Wait, exactly, I'll take the eggs off. I shouted, but the man didn't seem to hear me. He only turned around for a second. And then opening his mouth, he began to vomit with characteristic sounds. A strange green liquid was pouring out of his mouth right on the floor, not far from me. Immediately taking a step back, I swore again. What the hell is this? How are you? I asked the guy, well, or what was left of him. Without reacting to me, the guy continued to vomit on the floor. This is some kind of bitch nest of bugs, we need to get out of here and quickly. We need help. The puking guy's eyes were as empty as glass. He didn't say anything, and he didn't seem to care much about my words. What is that smell? I thought, finally realizing the stench that came from him. Can a person even smell like that? Something's not right here. There's really some damn heresy going on here. This guy. What's the matter with him anyway? There's something wrong with him. Suddenly, my eyes widened with fear. I saw the head of this creature first appear from behind the window, and then it turned in my direction. Ah. In fear, I fell right among a pile of corpses. Monsters one by one climbed into the broken window. I must say they crawl no less deftly than they fly. Lying among the corpses, I covered my face. Either not to scream, or because it seemed that this pungent smell could kill me. The monsters that came inside surrounded the man who vomited slime. Noticing him, they obviously agreed on something, and then began to search. Watching them crawl back and forth, I pondered my thoughts. They are looking for it. Why did they all come here? While I was thinking, the whole floor was shaking from the running of these damn giants. And so am I with him. I was carefully peeking out from under my arm when I suddenly noticed another person. The girl got to her feet and began to beg for help. Oh. Help. I'm very thirsty. What's going on here? She was clearly exhausted. She was barely moving, and her conversation was barely discernible. Suddenly one of the wasps noticed her. Without taking her eyes off, she apparently began to transmit messages. BZZZ. BZZZ. And a second later, this ruthless monster beheaded the girl without even thinking. Her body crashed down a couple of meters away from me. I was horrified by what I saw. However, after dealing with the girl, all the monsters left the room as if on command. The wasps left, and I continued to shake with fear, completely not understanding what was happening. My teeth clicked together like drums at a concert. And my heart was beating so fast that it seemed I was about to die. Why did these dukes surround a woman and kill her, but they didn't touch that guy? No, I don't have time to think about it. I need to get out of here, and as soon as possible. With these thoughts, I crawled carefully, without making too much noise. Looking at the guy who was still standing, I thought. You need to stay away from him, maybe his vomit attracts bugs. I need to get out of this hell. It seemed like I had been crawling for ages. However, I planned to accelerate the pace of it. After all, if the bugs noticed me, I would automatically share the fate of that girl. After a while, I crawled to the main corridor. It was filled with pale guys moving lifelessly, just like that guy. No, I thought. I can't get out through the main corridor. Then my way is through the fire escape. It was incredibly difficult to crawl. Every couple of meters, I had to go around various obstacles, whether it was sentry pukes or a pile of collapsed concrete. So it was on the fire escape. The entire dressing room was pelted with stones and other concrete materials. In addition, there was a corpse lying at the entrance, with the same eggs on its back. Breathing heavily, I gathered my strength and stood up, simultaneously making sure that the corpse would not pursue me. I yanked the door handle hard. Why doesn't it open? Because it's not all warped? Come on. I was pushing hard on the door, pushing it in different directions. The door creaked heavily and twitched, but it was very tight. And finally. Great. It's opened. Although this is the 270th floor, but it should be easy further. Creak. Because I'm coming down. At that moment, my joyful face changed to a sad one. When I opened the door, I found only a cliff down. The whole piece of the building was destroyed, and as for evil, it was in this place where I wanted to go down. Looking down, I found a broken car. Ruined streets, and not a single living soul. A terrible sight. My face was covered with horror. The only chance of salvation was lost. Standing on the edge, I heard a strange crunching sound. Instinctively, I grabbed the doorway, and stones fell from under my foot. What? But how? How did this happen? Oh, shit. I was almost crying when suddenly, I was attacked by maggots. Turning around, I noticed that the eggs on that guy's back had hatched. And now they were trying to eat my legs. Stumbling because of fear and trying to throw off the maggots, I stepped on a fragile piece of concrete. And now I was hanging on the edge. But it seemed to suit the larvae quite well. They were crawling right at me, trying to take a bite out of me. Without thinking, I grabbed on with one hand tighter, and with the other I began to beat the creatures. In a moment, both larvae were defeated. However, this did not go unnoticed. I heard footsteps in the hallway. And then I saw their source. Another monster spy was moving towards me like a zombie. Panic, I tried to feel the concrete on the lower floor with my feet. But I didn't have long to hang. As expected, my strength has left me. I'm still an ordinary office worker. Gathering the last of my strength, I grabbed a metal pin sticking out of the concrete. Saved. It remains only to go down to the floor below. Okay, slow and steady. And just as I was about to jump, as a familiar hum was heard behind me. It's bad. Calm down. I mentally repeated to myself, squinting at the huge beetle with wings behind my back. I was holding on with all my strength to a piece of concrete slab, while a larva was hanging on me, trying to bite off a tasty morsel, and a giant wasp was hovering behind my back. I'll say this, it's damn difficult. I felt her presence and heard the oppressive buzzing sound from her wings. Suddenly, the mutant wasp flew closer and its antennae touched my head. I was already at the limit. My limbs were barely twitching from the damn tension, but it was dangerous to move. Either endure it or die right there on the spot. I gritted my teeth, sweating, and watched the wasp's antennae that appeared at my head. Just let go. I mentally said, hold on to the metal tube that was sticking out of the stove. I'd rather have my head bitten off or eaten alive. I let go of the metal tube a little by inertia and was surprised. I immediately froze, afraid to breathe. A picture of the past time rose before my eyes. My beautiful wife is hugging our child, who is silently sucking her fist with a serious look. If I die here, my cold reason immediately returned to me, my wife and daughter will be left alone in this world. And I gripped the concrete slab tighter. In this world I can't die. Immediately, in raised tones, I exclaimed mentally. Not now. I'm not going to die. But the silence was broken only by the buzzing of the overgrown insect still present behind me. A green larva, more like a caterpillar, slowly but surely crawled along the sleeve of my suit. Most likely from the fact that the fabric prevented her from smelling the flesh. The whiskers of the mutant wasp touched the larva and immediately began to probe it. Suddenly, the mutant let out a squeal, which almost started to lay the hearing. Sweat broke out on my face here from fright. What to expect now? How will it turn out? Something crunched nearby. I immediately began to inspect the area in an accessible viewing angle and look for an escape route. A concrete slab protruding from a glass window caught my eye, which once was also either a floor or a wall. There I need to jump. Immediately I mentally decided on a desperate move. But suddenly the mutant wasp decided to fly away, leaving me still hanging on the concrete slab. Not at all, this is a very strange turn of events. I didn't understand why she decided to do this, because I already thought that I was screwed and needed to run as fast as possible. More precisely, to retreat to another position. She just flew away. Why? Mentally I thought, looking after her. Why didn't she kill me? It doesn't matter. I thought and grabbed the metal pipe with both hands. Now I have a chance. I need to get up quickly. Breathing heavily and ignoring the neighbor on my arm, I tried to get into a more stable position and not be on the verge of life and death. Sweat trickled down my face as I made my way to the area I needed. I got to the edge of the concrete slab on which I was, and I immediately felt like laughing softly. Was that ledge really that far away? I wondered mentally. Why did he seem so close before? Did I really think I could jump up there? Still breathing heavily and studying the situation, I swallowed. Wow. I shouted at the top of my voice. And immediately jumped on the ledge that I liked. It wasn't, something had to be done about it. I have no choice. Thoughts were racing in my head. I'll try while I still can. If I stay here and get caught by bugs. I began to think. The ledge was so close to my outstretched hand. Or nothing. But the fate of the villain ordered otherwise, and I flew past him without the opportunity to somehow grab. I flew by. Shouting loudly at the top of my voice, I flew past the cherished ledge of concrete tiles and flew lower and lower. But suddenly I hit my foot on a metal beam. It can be seen that it was one of the beams of the frame of the building. I spun in the air and continued to fly with my back down. On the one hand, it's good, on the other hand, it's not very good. I landed on a piece of concrete not with my back, which is not bad in principle, but with my shoulder joint, which is not good. It is not advisable to remain without any limb at such a time. But it turned out that I was only dreaming about relaxation. The slab was tilted and began to slide down from it quickly and correctly. Fortunately, he immediately reacted somehow to grab. My attempt was not successful, but I tried my best. By pinching his fingers in blood and tearing off his nails by the roots, I still stopped my descent and hung on the edge of this concrete slab. Breathing heavily and holding on with all my might, I looked up. My hands were shaking a little, but I tried to hold on to the last. "You are welcome," I asked in my mind, feeling myself holding on with the last of my strength and slowly sliding down from the stone ledge. "You can, Lee Yunsun." Mentally, I encouraged myself with all my might. At one point, I even felt a heartbeat in my ears. "You can. You're not here. You will die." I thought about how my hands slipped and I flew down again. The hair on which my life was merry was still cut short. I fell rather sharply on my back. The air inside his lungs immediately burst out due to the impact. I looked at the sky, not believing that I was still alive and was not smeared into a cake on the asphalt outside the building. Is this exactly the machinations of my fate? I lay in silence, thinking about what had happened and afraid to move for a while. I'm alive. Breathing fast, I thought, looking at my still intact hands. I'm still alive. My subconscious rejoiced. Standing carefully on all fours, I began to carefully make my way along the ledge to the building in order to leave my already precarious position. I got to some floor. 2 doors, and in the middle, no matter how funny it is, there is a figure of a man made of concrete. The fire escape is destroyed. I began to think about the information that I know. Crumbs, but still. I can't go down it. I don't think there's anyone else left here. I'll try to walk down the main corridor. I peeked around the corner to check the area for enemies first. But I saw only an empty corridor with many doors. Okay, there doesn't seem to be anyone. I'll go here. Nothing has collapsed here yet. I was thinking, still watching from around the corner. Now I can survive. But before I could move, one of those creatures loomed over me, or rather what the wasps did to the man. Something with eggshells on its back. I immediately screamed and recoiled against a wall. He was standing over me, holding nothing but a monkey wrench in his hand. I was afraid of the upcoming showdown. That he miraculously survived, and here you are. But this something stood like an idol and did not move. My pulse was beating faster in my ears, my face was covered with sweat, and the creature did not take its eyes off the larva that clung to my hand and did not get off. After a while, it turned around and walked away down the corridor, still holding the wrench in its hand. I was breathing fast from the shock I experienced, and my heart was still pounding as often. But I was silent, digesting what was happening. What? Why did he just leave? My thoughts filled the questions. Why him? Then I squinted at the caterpillar on my arm, still hanging in a death grip. Maybe. I thought, not taking my eyes off the ugly head of the insect that chewed my suit. But before I had time to think about something, someone grabbed me by the shoulder, and I was doubly shocked. Having noticed before that a fragment of a concrete slab the size of a stone, I immediately began to reach out to him diligently in order to grab and strike the offender. But as soon as I swung with a yell, trying to intimidate the enemy, I immediately stopped. Stop. It's me. Director Choi Sung stuttered and waved his arms. There were no injuries on him, and a flashlight was attached to his head. I silently stared at him without blinking, still holding the stone in my hand and not letting go. Director Choi? I exclaimed, stuttering, and still lowered the stone. Yes, yes. He exclaimed to me immediately in response. Manager Lee, you're alive. But the attack of joy did not last long. He immediately turned his back on me and headed somewhere. Faster. Hurry up and get inside. We crawled under the rubble into one of the offices. The blockage blocked the entrance, but there was a small hole at the bottom, just enough for an adult to crawl through. This place was very convenient for hiding from adversity. At least for a while, because we were met by a supply of 8 bottles of water for use by the cooler. Director. How are you? He immediately asked the man opposite. I was lucky. He said. Anyway, it's good that. At least someone else survived. He grinned, looking in my direction. I knew. That you will survive. Sure. I was the only one who spoke in response to him. But, Director, like you. I asked again, studying the dry rations and water supplies out of the corner of my eye. To which the director only sighed in response. I don't know exactly what happened. He finally spoke. I only saw a swarm of beetles attacking people. But no. I snorted. How are you still alive? Hey. Exactly. The man spoke, climbing into some small box. Forgot. You were unconscious. Then just calm down and listen. From what I've seen, bugs have two different ways of attacking people. Handing me a green package, the director said. They either sting them to knock them out and lay eggs on them, then these people become food for the larvae. Or they lay eggs on people while they are still conscious. You've seen how these people move, right? He asked, having told the information known to him. Apparently, eggs laid in this way parasitize the victim. Thinking, he began to reflect. In other words, these people become slaves to bugs. No. That's not what I'm talking about. I couldn't stand it and raised my voice without getting the necessary information. How did you survive, director? But he just looked at me sternly, without removing his hand from his chin. The director was sitting thinking about something and did not take his eyes off me. As if he was debating whether to tell him or not. How did I survive? The director voiced the question. I don't even know how to explain it. And by the way, he suddenly turned to me right there, you don't seem very happy to see me. On the contrary, I am very glad that you are alive and well, Lee. It was as if he was translating the topic, hiding something about his salvation. I just swallowed nervously. Yes, maybe it looked that way from the outside, but… I stared at him in silence, but thoughts of him were swarming in my head. The only reason you're still alive is because… that, to save your skin, you hid behind other people's backs. That's what I wanted to say, but I didn't dare. Where should I start? The director spoke again, scratching his head. It's been 5 days. He puzzled me with the information he said. 5 days? I immediately asked, stunned by this information. Did you say 5 days? Not happening. I was indignant, denying to digest what I had heard. Where are the rescuers? 5 days and no one has come yet? What? The director was surprised when he heard my question. Have you been unconscious all these 5 days? Rescuers did not come. The director snorted. The military came instead. Military? I was surprised again and moved closer. Do you think bugs made holes in buildings? But then why are the bugs still here? I couldn't figure it out. Stop interrogating me. Choi Song-ch couldn't stand it. It's been 3 days since my cell phone died. How should I know? Yes, the military was here. He continued in raised tones. But I have no idea what they had in mind. They destroyed beetles, protected the area. Or maybe they were transporting important people to a safe place. I don't fucking know. They spent all their ammunition on the bugs. The director continued to tell more restrainedly, clutching a chocolate bar in his hand. And 2 days later they retreated. And one more thing, raising his voice again and unpacking the bar, the director continued. Manager Lee. Do you think I'm stupid? Do you think I don't know what you want to tell me? The director asked a question, taking a bite of food. That I supposedly used others to save myself. Did you guess? Fool. The man swore. Don't you have any idea how this world works? He was pointing at me with his finger, holding a half-eaten candy bar in his hand. Do you believe all these rumors about me, huh? It was the company that forced me to take over your project. He justified himself by recalling the past. They called me that day. They made me play the bad guy. You know, it wasn't the case when you can refuse. Remembering himself in the past, the director snorted. I even put in a good word for you. And I'm not lying. He said. Use your brain. You'd be fired, and who do you think would be next? Yeah. The man shouted out in emotion. Trust me. You and me, we're in the same boat. It's true. Choi Sung-ch muttered while lowering his head. I'm just a guy who needs to feed his family. I just stared back at him in silence, without saying a word. He was still looking at me dejectedly in response, having stopped eating for a while. Whatever it was, he broke the silence after a while. Why did you attach this shit to yourself? He asked, squinting at the caterpillar on my arm. Come here. He said, reaching out his hand to the maggot. I'll help you take it off. He reached for the furry something. I was surprised that he was not afraid of this creature, and he was not afraid that she might attack him if he picked her up. For some reason, I immediately pulled my hand away, preventing the director from touching the ill-fated creature. Everything is fine. I snorted. It's stuck pretty deep in the sleeve. I'll take it off later. But in my mind I thought of something else. We must not lose vigilance. He definitely wants something from me. Ah, said the director and spread his hands, remaining in his place. Okay. By the way. Suddenly a thought occurred to me that puzzled me. What are you doing here? Why haven't you run away yet? The director was only surprised by my question. Then he sighed heavily and looked away. If I had said. He began. You wouldn't believe it. This even puzzled me even more. Follow me. Suddenly he spoke and crawled to the exit of the shelter. We crawled in complete silence along the corridor along the wall, passing the closet and the vines that sprouted here for decoration. Where are we going? I asked, puzzled by our path and not understanding what the director wanted to tell me. But in response, the man only shushed, making it clear that it was worth shutting up at the moment. We crawled up to some kind of hole gaping in the wooden wall. Look over there. He spoke and pointed to this hole, puzzling me even more. I approached the hole, but when I looked there, I was very surprised by what I saw. My heart immediately started pounding wildly. In the middle of the room lay a pile of human bodies, surrounded by either larvae or pupae. Certainly not with what was hanging on my arm. Surely some new stage of their development. They were immobilized and piled up there. Decided to inform me Choi Songch. I don't know why, but the bugs didn't lay eggs on them. Look over there, he said, standing right behind me, at the edge of the pile. I turned my attention to the area my friend was talking about. There lay the body of a friend of mine with whom we worked together. The brunette was lying unconscious with her arms outstretched in different directions, and a larva was crawling over her body. She's a member of our team. The director spoke, and sweat broke out on his face. I can't just leave her. It's not too late. She's still alive. He spoke while I was sitting with my mouth open from what I saw and heard the pounding of my wildly beating heart. We have to save her. The director spoke. But there are too many wasps here to easily pass them by. He focused on the mutant wasps that were sitting quietly under the ceiling. Any suggestions? The director asked the question while I was looking at a friend from whose eyes tears were pouring, but her body was not moving. I lightly hit the surface with my fists out of desperation and clenched my jaws. Suddenly an idea came to my mind, from which I abruptly opened my eyes. I'll get her out. I said confidently right there. What? The director was surprised, looking at the back of my head. But how? The bugs will catch you. He said, while I began to take off my jacket in silence. They're swarming with them. I dropped a magatrite in the middle of my jacket. What are you doing? The director still did not understand the course of my thoughts while I was swaddling the larva in my clothes. But having wrapped this creature in clothes, I immediately mercilessly began to crush this something, striking sharp blows with my foot on it. Ugh. He said it after I picked up my soiled suit in the entrails of this worm. Armed with my soiled clothes, I carefully began to descend the stairs, trying not to make much noise and not to attract a lot of unnecessary attention. Just bring her here, right? I asked again in order to make sure of the task. Yes. The director stammered. But how? I looked around for the presence of those who are in the corridor. There were mostly carriers of unopened eggs, armed with what? I covered my head with my soiled jacket and sighed, decided to move. Moving on all fours along the wall, trying not to make extraneous sounds, I moved closer and closer to my intended goal. The first barrier is quite close to me, so it is also armed with a hatchet. They barely lifted their legs, thereby creating a shuffling sound that broke the silence. I felt like my heart was beating pretty fast from the excitement I was experiencing, that at any moment everything could go wrong and end in my death. I saw one of the workers with a bunch of eggs on his body. One of them was also located on the head. The heavy blonde man was walking while in some kind of trance. Suddenly he turned his head, paying attention in my direction. His face did not express any emotion, and his eyes were blurring in different directions. We did not take our eyes off each other, and at some point I seemed to forget how to breathe, just mentally praying for the best outcome of the situation. My heart immediately began to beat like crazy. You might accidentally die from its rupture. So worried. But the man turned around and walked away, making the same shuffling sounds. I knew. I mentally rejoiced, breathing fast from the shock I experienced. Because of the maggot slime, they mistake me for one of them. Okay. I decided. We just need to keep going in the same spirit. But I didn't have time to survive one problem, as another one loomed over me and was much larger than the previous one. Suddenly, the jaws of a carnivorous killer wasp appeared in front of my face and clenched a couple of times in the air. She was standing right over me and didn't seem to be thinking of walking away yet. I almost screamed. I thought to myself, and my heart started pounding again like a mad rush of adrenaline. I looked around a little and immediately met the gaze of a huge monster's head, which was quite clacking with its mouth. But after a while, this something quietly left and flew away. I immediately pressed myself to the floor, screaming to myself. God, what a shock I experienced at that moment. What am I doing? I thought, hearing only the wild pounding of my heart, which filled my ears. Utter madness. It won't work. I thought, trying to get back on all fours. I need to get back. I tensed up as soon as I turned around, deciding to go back. Right in front of me was a huge hole in the wall with an exit just the same to a mountain of bodies with maggots mixed in. Her face, frozen with horror, looked at me with a frightened look. It was as if she was begging me to save her and not leave her. Suddenly her body began to twitch, and she was breathing large portions of air. I gritted my teeth in anger. How stupid she is to act so recklessly. Okay. Nevertheless, I decided to continue the path I had planned. I would like at least a little bit of courage. I thought, continuing my way to the mountain of human bodies. Taking step by step, I was getting closer to her. "Miss Song," I said so softly that only she could hear, and immediately shushed her. "Don't move. I'll save you." I took her hands in order to get her and shushed her again. "If you move, they'll notice us. Please calm down. Please," I begged, "don't move. Run." She stammered. "Run. Run, run," he said, still crying. "Stay away. Stay away." I was surprised at her insistent request. "There. Uterus." The brunette spoke, interrupting. "Uterus?" she exclaimed. "What?" I didn't understand. On the far side, a huge ass of one of the killer wasps appeared in the hole of the wall, and the floor under it began to creak. I looked in the direction Miss Song was pointing. And I was afraid to even blink. Through the passage that connected the corridor and the room, I saw the huge back of one of the monster wasps. As the girl put it, it was none other than the uterus. Suddenly the huge head of this creature looked out through the opening. Drooling, she looked in our direction, or rather in the direction of the mountain of bodies. Her neck stretched out, which was unthinkable. Although their size is not conceivable. From the fact that the wasp rushed to the pile of bodies, I was carried away by a shock wave right there. I immediately fell into my conspiracy, revealing my identity to this monster. It smells like kerosene, no other way. Suddenly, the mutant wasps under the ceiling immediately began to move, and the buzzing of their wings could be heard at an increased volume, as if from everywhere. Just the slightest second and they immediately rushed in my direction, as if they had been given the signal to jerk. There was a huge mutant wasp behind me, thousands of her children above me. The situation was heating up just by the second. In front of me appeared activated pseudo-zombies that had been roaming the corridors of the floor before. No bugs or uninvited guests here. I thought immediately. And people are not allowed in here. This is the queen's nest. There were thousands and thousands of new eggs behind the uterus that she had laid recently. And I just had the stupidity to encroach on her food. I thought, not taking my eyes off the huge danger hanging over me. Until recently, I miraculously saved my ass, and now. Walkers covered with eggs immediately rushed at me. Among them was Miss Song. But most of all my attention was attracted in all this bacchanal by none other than director Choi Song-ch. The man was rushing at full speed, carrying a coil of rope on a special reel. He brazenly took advantage of me, as in principle I thought. And I got caught trustfully. He attached a rope to the coil, which most likely used to have a cable from the elevator. Which was not there at the moment, or he fell down during the incident. He caught on the rope and turned in my direction, immediately drew attention to me. And what do you think I saw? A smile. The mocking smile of a cunning rascal who masterfully tricked around his finger. He didn't care about our colleague, he just needed to distract attention. He carefully jumped down into the elevator shaft and began to descend slowly. And do you know what I saw when the body of this bastard practically disappeared from sight? He showed me the classroom. So he knew from the very beginning that this was the queen's nest. Thoughts swarmed in my head while I sat in a kind of stupor. And he used me as bait. Sweat immediately broke out on my face. To distract them from the elevator shaft and escape? You? I said angrily, through clenched jaws. You fucking son of a bitch. I still shouted to him to say goodbye. The mutant wasps immediately reacted to the loud sound and stared in my direction together, buzzing. Arg! I exclaimed, feeling the oppressive presence of the uterus close in my imminent demise. Suddenly, the glass in the windows of the floor broke and something flew quickly. A small object, burning brightly, like a star, very quickly aspired to the ceiling. A loud explosion and blinding light filled the room. A bunch of small bright particles immediately flew down. It was as if it was a fragmentation grenade and the recoil came from it. These particles immediately rushed to the mutant wasps, and as if a lot of shots began to hit them. I looked at it as if mesmerized. Although we should take advantage of such a good chance and run as fast as we can. A small sun with many rays was now in the building and riveted my gaze. Small particles did not stop hurting these monsters, bringing them wild discomfort. The mutants twisted, hissed discontentedly and thought they could avoid the blows. A kind of monster ball, in which they dance under the fireworks. Fire fragments also hit the walkers, igniting them immediately. The room was filled with terrifying screams of pain and eerie hissing. They caught fire and smoldered like moths that had come very close to the fire and now could not fly away. What? I thought, looking at this fiery party. Phosphorus bombs? I looked around in an attempt to please the one who was trying to sleep and sacrificed his life. Smiling stupidly, I immediately exclaimed. Miss Song. This is the military. We are saved. But the body that had once been a man lay charred almost completely. Only a metal bracelet somehow withstood this temperature. I sat there in shock. But after a while, I still recovered from the shock and immediately shouted loudly. No. Oh no. Covering myself with my hands and still squinting at the embers, I said. Not happening. Not happening. I exclaimed louder at the end. Boss. It came from behind me. Boss. You are welcome. The voice was familiar to me, but I refused to believe it. It's hot. This was Miss Song. And she certainly wasn't a coal. My leg. She lay there and didn't move. Next to her feet, one of these fiery fragments was burning, right at the sole of her shoes. I immediately knocked down the ill-fated shoe with a sharp movement of my foot, saving even the slightest hint of a fire from further. I threw the girl on my shoulder and, quickly examining the area, began to decide how to retreat to a safer place. Hurry up. I began to adjust myself, varying between hail and splinter. We have to get out of here. I hurried to the elevator shaft in order to use the same opening as the director. As they say, it was not. When I reached the desired point of retreat, I tried the rope tension. The rope is not stretched. Did he escape? I immediately thought, realizing this situation. Or did he fall? I thought again, seeing the top of the elevator car and hearing strange sounds. Well, I'm sure of one thing, I began to think, looking at the elevator shaft. That damn rogue Choi should know the safest way. Suddenly another glass broke and another phosphorus bomb flew to the ceiling again. Bang. An explosion rang out, lighting up the room. And once again, a fiery rain poured through the room, sent to exterminate the mutant wasps. There is no choice. It was solved while under the protection of a concrete pillar. If we stay here, we'll burn. I grabbed Miss Song and, throwing her over my shoulder, immediately hurried away. Breathing fast and hugging the sluggish body of the employee, I grabbed the rope. Miss Song. I turned to her. Come on, get it together. Can you even move your shoulder? Boss, she finally said, are we really going down? Leave me alone. She spoke again. I don't want to die in the dark. You'd think I'd want to. I immediately snorted in response. The rope made a kind of crunch when I clung to it. But taking the will into my fist and believing in the best, I tried to calm down. Miss Sun. I said. You asked me what I was going to do. That's what? Survive. I spoke again. No matter what kind of madhouse is going on in this world. She just stared at nothing in silence. Her eyes dimmed after the incident, and her skin turned white and became like a sheet of paper. Suddenly, from behind, amid a cacophony of screams, there was an exclamation of the uterus. I put a homemade noose on the girl and myself and wanted to let us down, but this sound put me in a kind of stupor for a while. A minute and I immediately, holding onto the rope, jumped into the elevator shaft. Pretty quickly we slid down. So much so that a little more steam will come from my hand, and it will look like embers. Only a scream was heard in the mine, and the smell of burning was carried. Checkpoint. A few screens, turnstiles and complete silence. Suddenly, a rustling sound was heard from the elevators, and clouds of dust went in all directions. In an empty booth of a disabled elevator, a hatch in the ceiling suddenly opened. 2 feet without shoes in nylon tights torn in some places got out through the hatch. A little later, a calmly hanging body appeared in a black miniskirt, a blue jacket and a white blouse. Hit. The body fell to the floor like a sack of potatoes and seemed to show no signs of life. I looked at Miss Song's body released by me and breathed quickly, trying to catch my breath after the descent. Carefully. The girl muttered. Please go slower. I almost dropped you. I said immediately, leading her by the arm away from the checkpoint. How much do you weigh? 48. There was only a brief response. Whatever. I finally spoke and smiled a little. The main thing? We're alive. The military will deal with them. Let's get out of here. We left the building and headed further and further away. There was the same devastation nearby. Broken windows, mangled cars with broken windshields as well. Suddenly I came across a large object in my field of vision. It was a tank located behind the clouds of raised dust. "Oh, the tank," I exclaimed and raised my hand up. "Here. Help. Here. We're here," I yelled joyfully and waved at the machine nearby. But when I got closer, I just froze with my hand raised in the air. There really was a tank in front of us, but it didn't move, and there was a hole in front of its hull. A large machine called a tank is painted with spots camouflage and is ennobled by a large hole in the hull. A hole with an uneven edge, rather crushed into a gargoyle. It was as if the tank was shot from some cannon with a core, but one that could penetrate the skin. "Where is everyone?" I asked a question, surprised by what I saw. "What happened?" I was hoping for outside help, but the picture was not particularly pleasing. "The tank armor is pierced through." I said the obvious out loud, which is quite difficult not to notice. I let my colleague go so that she could stand by herself. Suddenly she squeezed my hand tightly, clinging to it tenaciously. The girl looked away in fright. There was a mute horror on her face, as if a ghost was walking somewhere to the side. "Stay away." Suddenly she exclaimed, breaking the silence, and perspiration appeared on her face. "It's dangerous. It seems to me. There's something inside." She immediately uttered her warnings. I turned in her direction and, still feeling her trembling body, decided to follow on. We headed in a completely different direction. I still continued to lead her, throwing her arm over my shoulders. We passed cars with broken windows, overturned and so with broken integrity transport. Multi-story buildings one after another were covered with some kind of substance that hid the buildings underneath. From the window of one of the buildings flew a swarm of some insects, most likely the same killer wasps. We kept walking and didn't stop. Empty roads, vehicles frozen on the roads, a collapsed bridge. There is a pile of scattered papers with some information lying around on the road surface. Maybe someone was rushing to work at the time of the attack or the wind blew out of some office. I was wondering what kind of sheets of paper with text are lying around here. If you look closely, they are similar to each other. I took one of the sheets in order to read it. The information on it read as follows. Martial law has been declared on the territory of Gyeonggi and Seoul. First, do not panic. Martial law was introduced in order to ensure public order and the destruction of mutant insects that infested the city. Secondly, in order to avoid problems, we ask you to evacuate from the territory of military operations as soon as possible. Third, citizens. Currently, an unknown species of insects has invaded Seoul. Until the insects are destroyed, we ask all residents to gather at the emergency evacuation points listed on the back. I immediately turned the sheet over in the hope of seeing the necessary information. After all, there is a possibility that someone managed to evacuate to these points, and we will find help. Operating evacuation points. The inscription above the schematically drawn mainland read. There were also inscriptions around the mainland. Faju. Sando. Sehyun. Anyang. Seongnam. I swallowed nervously, looking at this picture. "Miss Song," I immediately turned to my colleague, "did you see that?" She is standing not far from me and is also looking at one of the scattered leaflets, but with some half-page photo and screaming inscriptions. Maybe a sheet of newspaper? This? I started. A grimace of fear reappeared on the girl's face, and perspiration appeared. Bugs. Soul. The words that were visible to me from afar on her piece of paper. And also, in the photo there were high-rise buildings covered with a strange substance, like a spider web or more precisely a cocoon. Seoul has fallen. There was a large inscription on the photo. Unknown giant beetles. They spread quickly throughout the city. The government is inactive, the disaster is taking on grandiose proportions. That's all I managed to see, as we were immediately distracted by a huge beetle flying across the sky. And we immediately tensed up. Miss Song began to slowly climb under the car, and I did not lag behind her either. But the beetle didn't seem to notice us, or he just decided to fly on some important business of his own. "What will you do?" I immediately asked the girl I saved. "And?" she said, as if she hadn't heard my question. "I need to go to Sando or Sehyun." I immediately explained my further actions to her. "I live in Sijeondan. My family would go to one of these centers." I decided to immediately explain the principle of choosing my next actions. "My family needs me," I said again, without taking my eyes off Miss Song. "I have to find them." There was only incomprehension and loss on her face. It felt like I was speaking a different language now and she didn't understand me. "Take me with you." A minute later, she immediately exclaimed. "My family is in Dijian, but there is no way to get there, so I need to get to the nearest center." "Good idea." After thinking about it, I said and stood up. "Then let's hurry up." She sighed as she slowly got up. Her body was shaking from the strain it had experienced for the first time. This unbent reluctantly. She walked on the asphalt with almost bare feet, only in a thin nylon tights, which will be a problem in the future in this situation. "I need to find you some shoes." I immediately suggested, so to speak, the first point of action. "You won't get far barefoot." I looked around, figuring out in my brain where we could find what we needed. There is devastation all around. Broken windows in buildings. Tank with camouflage coloring. Stripes on the asphalt from its tracks. A broken mini fence. I decided to go to the tank anyway and stopped in front of it. The door opened with a crack and a creak, but I still threw beams of light into the booth. I didn't see any people inside. But there were backpacks with equipment, a disassembled couch, seating. "Come in." I told her right away. Why?" She was surprised. "We need to walk 20 to 30 miles. I began to explain. "There must be some supplies here." We climbed inside and immediately began to look around inside in search of something that could surely be useful to us on a difficult journey. "Look there," I said, examining one of the backpacks. "I'll look here." After unpacking the backpack, I immediately began to inspect the contents. Nevertheless, the search was successful and I fished out leather boots from the equipment. "Hey," I called out to her right away, "what size are you wearing? Try these." But she didn't respond and didn't turn around to face me, as if frozen by the sight of something. "What's there?" I immediately asked, coming closer. "Did you find anything?" She looked back at me immediately, holding nothing but a machine gun in her hands. I stared at her without blinking. She has a cold weapon in her hands, which we will need so much on our way. Why would there be guns and ammunition lying around here? I immediately thought to myself. What happened to the soldier? I began to examine the find. "Well, how? Are they suitable?" I asked when Miss Song tried on my find. "Too big." She spoke in response. "If the leg gets in, then they fit. We take everything we need and dump," I said, moving away to inspect the rest. Hey," she suddenly called out. "I don't feel very well," she muttered, looking away. "Could you get some rest?" I looked at her after a moment of silence. I don't think, immediately, thoughts began to swarm in my head that we would be able to find a safer place in the near future. Furthermore, I agree. Nevertheless, I voiced my decision. "Let's take a little break." I immediately went to the exit and closed the door so that no one dared to get to us. "How do you know," she suddenly asked, sitting closer to me, "how to open and close such doors?" "Army." I immediately snorted in response. "Which division?" Miss Song persisted. "Tiger." My answer immediately followed. "What's it? Special Forces?" I was a simple private. I was sitting behind her, armed with a recently found edged weapon. "If I had known that then," she mumbled back, "I would have visited you." I grinned and said, crossing my arms over my chest. "Cute." Less than a minute later, I immediately blacked out, plunging into the world of Morpheus, still sitting. Miss Song lay on her side on a soft kind of sofa. I suddenly woke up in a lying position and on a hard cold surface, with my hands folded under my head. Did I fall asleep? Thoughts immediately flashed through my head as I began to look around sleepily. How long did I sleep? Suddenly, I felt like I was pierced by needles of crazy pain when I tried to move. I immediately groaned in pain and began to breathe quickly. Somehow overcoming the pain, I still rolled over on my back. "I can't move," I screamed in my mind. "Is it because of the stress experienced?" "Hey, Miss Song." I started calling her right away for help. "Are you here? Help." I sat up a little, but looking around, I didn't see her anywhere. Where did she go? I thought, and the lightning pain hit my body again, and I immediately screamed loudly. Lifting my pant leg, I was amazed at how my limb had significantly increased in size. Why is it so swollen? I was mentally amazed at what I saw. I hope it's not broken. Suddenly I heard a noise from the door and it bothered me. I closed it properly. "What is the problem? Miss Song?" I asked into the void, hoping that she was just going to the toilet. No other way. The door creaked open, revealing the silhouette of a man. But it wasn't Miss Song. There was a man with a stony expression on his face. He was in uniform, and the inscription Unity was attached to his helmet. "Oh, hey." I immediately exclaimed, delighted with the military man who most likely came to save me. "Please help me. I can't move." I looked at him in silence, waiting for at least some actions that would help me in a difficult situation, but there was only silence in response. The man held the gun forward so that the muzzle was looking straight at me. A second later, a shot is flying in my direction. I exclaimed in surprise and tried to dodge, which turned out, but with difficulty. I screamed again and grabbed for the weapon we found not so long ago. The next shot was already initiated by me. The man was thrown on his back, and the machine gun was thrown aside. Breathing fast, I still held the machine gun tightly and did not take my eyes off that man. I was afraid that in such a difficult time, I had wounded a peaceful one. He has probably just immediately thought that I was one of them, so he fired. Apologize. I mumbled, getting out of the tank. "How are you there?" I immediately asked, but slowed down as soon as something started to turn over. This man is already infected and is a walker and in no other way. And I thought. As soon as he stood up, a green liquid immediately poured out of his mouth, which seemed to be a signal for the gathering of these monsters. "No. Stop." I exclaimed, heading in his direction in order to stop the irreversible. "Enough." I said enough is enough. I yelled, stretching out my hands to him. Furthermore, I tried to clamp his mouth tightly so that nothing else would come out of the walking. But suddenly someone grabbed me from behind by the collar of my shirt. I was jerked back sharply and dragged along like a sack of potatoes. It was someone in a motorcycle helmet with a lawn mower under his arm. "Idiot." A voice came from behind the helmet. "Do you want to ruin yourself?" This someone was indignant. "Follow me." The walker was lying on his back and still spitting out the green liquid. But since his posture did not change, he also choked in it. He is like a turtle that lies on its shell and cannot get up and continue functioning without anyone's help. He just stupidly waved his arms and turned his head. "Get up already," my so-called savior, who dragged me in an incomprehensible direction, did not lower his tone. "Get moving. Stop counting crows." I tried in every possible way to slow him down and naturally get up myself, as he pointed out to me. But it was as if he wouldn't let me do it. Suddenly there was a loud buzzing above us. It's finally arrived mutant insects to the cry of that walker. My savior was distracted, and I finally broke out of his tenacious grip. A group of 3 insect monsters really flew at us from the side of the building, filling the silence with their loud buzzing. The unknown man looked at the sky and seemed to be looking at something for a while, not looking away, although it would be worth hurrying. As they say, "And where is your rush now? Get inside. Now." He ordered as we approached the car. "And you?" I was surprised, but even without his instructions I was in a hurry to take a place. One of these harmful insects immediately hurried to the open hatch of the tank, not far from which lay the reason for their sudden flight. The insect, like a sane person, wasted no time immediately looking into the tank room in order to make sure if there was anyone there. In front of him stood an unknown man in a helmet with a lawn mower at the ready. He was holding the handle behind his back. And then he pulled sharply in order to start the mechanism of the device. The blade with sharp teeth immediately screamed and began to spin quite quickly, from which the teeth merged into one disc. The man immediately hit the head of a powerful insect, from which the green blood of the second began to spray in different directions. There was still the screeching of the blade, the crunching of the skull of the monster wasp, and the hissing of a dissatisfied insect. The man cut the monster's head and neck on the floors, and green blood immediately splashed in a fountain in different directions. This was also seen by the accompanying wasp partner and immediately began to make a crackling and dissatisfied hissing. The insect wasted no time and immediately reacted by grabbing the lawn mower with its claws on its head. A couple of movements and he broke the fastening connecting the handle to the blade. Having dealt with the deadly obstacle, the mutant insect immediately began to press on the man, making its way inside the tank. Then, as if nothing had happened, I emerged from behind his back, holding the gun ready to fire and immediately took aim, without wasting a second of our precious time. I immediately fired a burst at the insect in order not to give it a chance to survive. While he was holding the lawnmower, preventing him from moving to some extent and avoiding a blow, I pierced him and made a sieve. The monster released the lawn mower from its tenacious claws immediately. And the blade screamed again, as the current from the motor began to flow again, pushing it to move. Without wasting a moment, the unknown man immediately pointed his weapon at the monster in order to cut his neck. That he successfully succeeded and the monster's head immediately flew away. The helmet that protected the man's head was stained with splashes of monster blood, from which visibility was just zero. He put his hand to his helmet and immediately wiped the glass, which he needed for the visibility of objects. He brushed the small pieces of the monster and their blood, the color of swamp slime, aside from the glove. I was breathing fast, holding the machine gun and listening to my rapidly pounding heart, trying to come to my senses and calm down, but I couldn't. In front of the tank, the sprawled body of the monster lay on the ground, a little further away. That man was a military man with a clutch of eggs on his back. "Let's close the door." I immediately offered it to the unknown. "Stop." He spoke in response, holding out his hand in front of me. "I'll close it." He spoke and immediately leaned out of the tank. He shook his head, looking around the area and could not understand. He saw 3 insects flying from the building in their direction, but only 2 attacked. Suddenly, something grabbed the helmet tightly. He found the subject he had lost. The parasite grabbed the helmet of an unknown man with its mouth and held it tightly, not letting go of its caught prey. He was sitting on the roof of the tank, hiding and waiting. Suddenly he jerked his head up sharply, from which the helmet of an unknown man immediately flew away, revealing the head of a new acquaintance. The helmet didn't last long for the monster. The killer wasp immediately began to squeeze him hard, trying to crack him like a walnut. Suddenly, some uncomplicated detail fell off as if from the helmet. She fell on the surface of the tank roof. It lay on the tank skin like an ordinary unremarkable detail, without attracting any attention to itself. When suddenly there was a powerful explosion on the roof of the tank. Right where such a harmful bug was located. Hissing. And now there is an insect without a head and half a torso, along with its paws. They were torn off by a powerful explosion. We only saw clouds of dust outside the threshold of the tank through the still open door. "How did you know?" I immediately asked my new acquaintance. An older man, gray-haired, but strong. "I haven't lost my physical spirit. I saw 3 of them earlier." He immediately explained. "By the way, what were you doing with that soldier?" He decided to ask now, remembering what had happened before. If people with eggs vomit, it attracts bugs. I decided to explain right away so that there would be no misunderstanding between us. That's why I tried to stop him. Hey. The gray-haired man was surprised when he heard my answer and digested it immediately. "You knew that and you were sitting there anyway? I can't believe you're still alive." He immediately began to inspect this place with the hope of finding something that might surely come in handy. One of these finds was nothing more than a field dryer ashen. "Be careful." Soon, he muttered, trying to leave this place. "Well, good luck." "Wait." I exclaimed immediately, following him closely and not lagging a step behind. "Did you see a girl outside? 26 or 27 years old? She went somewhere while I was sleeping." I decided to ask right away, without wasting a moment. "What?" The man was immediately surprised and paused and turned in my direction. "Did you have a partner? There are few survivors here in the subway." "Survivors?" I was immediately glad to hear the news. "Are there many of them?" And I was already worried. Maybe she went to them for help. I immediately assumed. "Are you a retard?" A new acquaintance snorted, frowning. "I strongly advise you to avoid survivors." And, oh my god, a girl? I haven't seen her. He muttered and immediately turned his back on me and continued on his way. "I hope you find her in good health. But you shouldn't be hanging around here." What do you mean?" I was immediately taken aback and touched his shoulder, trying to stop him. "What happened to the survivors?" I immediately asked the question, not understanding the course of his thoughts. "You are welcome," I exclaimed, not taking my eyes off his back. "I've been out for a few days, I don't understand what's going on at all. Could you tell me?" I did not let up because I wanted to find out the answers to my questions. The man immediately fumbled in the pocket of his jacket, trying to find something. "I don't know," he said, taking something in his mouth and chewing, "whether this is typical of human nature. But the people stuck here went crazy and got into a crowd. They are armed and in some ways even more dangerous than bugs." He spoke while we were standing quietly in an open area. "If you meet any of them, then I wouldn't." He wanted to say something else, but he was immediately distracted by something. And I was surprised at such a sudden pause. "Too close." He spoke and immediately turned around as if he felt something. From the side of a tall red brick building with green domes of the roof, people were rushing at the ready with various types of weapons. Someone has a hoe, someone has an ordinary kitchen knife, a woman has a kitchen knife tied to a stick, imitating a spear, someone in the first row imitated a bat, driving nails lightly into the bar. Oh, shit. A new friend immediately cursed, looking around and starting his lawn mower faster. Back. I said back. He began to shout, waving his weapon. Last warning. Faster. Shoot. He shouted to me immediately, looking back. What? I exclaimed, surprised at such a sudden order. I said shoot. He shouted again, looking in my direction. Are you deaf? But these are people. I was immediately taken aback by this turn of events. Look at them. The gray-haired man shouted. We are not people to them. A handful of people with satisfied smiles and predatory lights in their eyes were crowding in front of us, ready to kill us on the spot at any second. Suddenly one of them, the one who made the pseudo-bat, swung it and screamed, trying to attack us. But the old man did not lose his skill and immediately reacted to this attack of the offender. Splashes of scarlet blood scattered around. Suddenly the attacker began to scream. My hand. He was shouting. It looks like the man still damaged his body with the blade. Have you seen assholes? The gray-haired man exclaimed while the man in front of him was crawling on the ground, clutching his hand with his body, and the bar was lying to the side. Get the fuck out of here. Out of the corner of my eye I saw a figure behind me. A short guy was standing on the stairs and was aiming at my partner. A yellow miner's helmet with a flashlight on his forehead, eyeglasses, a handkerchief hiding part of his face, and a homemade bow and arrows. Without wasting a second, I immediately pulled my friend by the scruff of the neck in my direction. Thus, he escaped the arrow's blow and remained alive. Hey! It's Robin Hood. Shouts rang out, rolling through the crowd of people gathered. Shoot him. That one over there. Faster. Take it off. Exclaimed my new acquaintance. Okay. I spoke in response and began to aim at the newly arrived obstacle. Click. Only the gun came out. Nothing else. And I was surprised mentally, looking at the weapon as if I see it for the first time. Did I shoot all the bullets? I tried to push a couple more times, but in response only the click of the trigger. Hey! Someone from the crowd exclaimed, noticing my confusion immediately. He doesn't have any bullets. Robin Hood, come here and shoot them at point-blank range. A kind of Robin Hood with glasses immediately began to pull the string on a homemade weapon and aim at his victims. We were surrounded by distraught people, who in turn were armed with both conventional weapons and homemade ones. Some have a shovel, some have a knife, some have a knife tied to a stick, imitating a spear. And they are led by their self-proclaimed Robin Hood. We knew, exclaimed the guy with the bat wrapped in barbed wire, that the end of the world was inevitable. You grab all the power and money for yourself, exclaimed another, also standing in this crowd, and we were treated like crap. It's like we're some kind of bugs. He was indignant, raising his voice and threatening with a hammer. You called us insects. It was heard again in the crowd. They looked down on us. Some of them had a homemade weapon that looked like a sickle tied to a stick or a knife and two sharp awls tied to a stick. The so-called Robin Hood has a pink girlish backpack with a star and the inscription star hanging behind his back. That's right, we are insects. The crowd exclaimed again. From now on we will live like bugs. We stood and were silent, not understanding what kind of jungle these people were heading into, but we didn't stop them from speaking out. We saw beetles destroying soldiers. They shouted again from the crowd. Thank goodness for the bugs. A brunette exclaimed in the crowd and raised his hands with scissors and a hammer in the air in exultation. That's right, we are insects. Cheers rang through the crowd. This is the land of insects. The crowd cheered again. Our land. Destroyed bridge. The transport of this almost extinct city stands still. High-rise buildings are covered with a component that is secreted by insects. Let's give them to the beetles. The crowd finally decided what to do with us. As a sacrifice. The beetles grew due to changes in the atmosphere. My new friend said that he saved my life. These same ones became cavemen in a matter of days because of their idiocy. Stop. Suddenly, a voice was heard from behind the crowd, causing the cheers of the assembled crowd to subside. And we were surprised. The crowd parted, whispering about something, letting something pass. The body of a man, the head of one of the insects, but in proportion to the body. He walked slowly, heading towards us. Shepherd. Shepherd. The crowd began to shout again, raising their weapons into the air. Guide us. Shepherd. I looked at this something and forgot how to blink and breathe. What the hell? I swore. In the hands of this one, something that seems painfully funny, was a book. And this book is the Bible. They are only sinners, said this insect man. Wanderers lost in this confusing world. Let us not know who they were before. We have to give them a chance. A chance to become one of us. The insect spoke without taking his eyes off us. Lay down your weapons and repent of your sins. The so-called preacher spoke and raised his right hand, as if to bless us. Repent and be blessed. Heh. The gray-haired man chuckled and began to look for something under his jacket. A couple of moves and he fished out a hand grenade. Did you think, my friend said, that we would fall for such crap? And then he pulled out the ring. Drop the Bible, bitch. I'm impressed by your ability to fool your brain. My new friend snorted. But I have not the slightest desire to join you. Let's just pretend we've never seen each other. He said, putting a grenade forward. Deal? But in response, the insect man only remained silent and did not take his large eyes off the gray-haired man in the jacket. Kill them. The overgrown insect immediately spoke briefly. The crowd immediately rushed at us, brandishing their weapons and shouting at the top of their lungs. The gray-haired man was even taken aback by this turn of events because he failed to intimidate. And what can we talk about for this? People are like cannon fodder. He doesn't care if they are mowed down with a grenade. Suddenly there was a blow from the side, and the bunch of crazy people immediately stopped without reaching their target. We immediately turned towards the sound, as did many of those present here. Miss Song stood at the top of the stairs. She had a backpack over her shoulders and a weapon in her hands. Frightened look. Get out. But not that. She shouted right away, trying to intimidate. Miss Dream. I spoke, recognizing my former companion, which surprised the old man. Is this your partner? He asked immediately. Miss Song was still standing above, ready to shoot at any moment. Although it looked more like a timid bunny with a grenade launcher. I warned. Get out. She screamed again at the top of her lungs. I will shoot. They stood silently and all looked at her, without taking their eyes off. But it slowly but surely began to dawn on them. This is a girl. That's right, but they are men and there are many of them. It smells like kerosene. Holy shit. Yeah. Remarks were heard from the crowd present. There is a feeling that there is already a completely different subtext here than regarding physical forces. Woman. Someone said again. Oh shit. I exclaimed immediately as soon as it dawned on me. Sleep, run. Woman. The men present exclaimed and immediately rushed towards her. Woman. Don't come. The brunette shouted again, threatening with a gun, and sweat appeared on her face. Not. I will shoot. I am not kidding. Clutching the weapon more and more tightly to herself, she shouted, trying to scare the brutalized people. But nothing stopped them, and a hooting rumble swept through the crowd. Suddenly there was a shot with a bright flash. The bullet reached one of the men approaching her and was thrown back by the shock wave. Following his bat, he immediately rolled down the stairs, kissing his body step by step. But Baba's scream did not end. The men did not stop and ran towards her like crazy. It looked even more like hungry people who were lured by a juicy steak. 3 shots from her weapon and cartridges immediately flew to the side, and 3 bright lights immediately flew into the crowd of distraught people. Someone was hit and he also flew head over heels down the stairs, but this didn't stop many others at all. Again, 3 shots flew into the crowd with bright flashes, and each time they were pushed back a little by the recoil of the gun. But it was not there. It is clear that someone has finally caught up with their tasty morsel, since someone's heavy palm rested on the gun, making it clear that she would stop shooting. In front of her, right next to her, one of the crazy people stood and, mockingly, looked at her, not taking his eyes off. He threw her gun away and threw her onto her back. Mocking her, the one who threw her to the ground without a word unceremoniously, immediately began to spread her legs in order to achieve what he was looking for and satisfy his brutal instincts. Creatures. My new acquaintance shouted, clearing his path with a lawn mower and mowing not grass, but living people. Get out. Let's get away from her. From the road. I also screamed, using the machine gun not for its intended purpose, but as a baton. They quickly removed their paws. Move over. They pressed forward one after another, almost lining up for the girl. I am the first. I am the first. Only their exclamations could be heard. Miss Song just screamed in fear, covering her face with her hands, trying to somehow protect herself from the rapists who attacked her like a dinner party. She screamed at the top of her lungs, and tears were already flowing down her cheeks. No. I shouted, using the butt of my weapon and hitting my opponents' heads with it. Miss Dream. Bastards. Enough. I shouted, unable to keep up with the crazy pack that surrounded my partner on all sides. Suddenly the gray-haired man stopped. He looked back and did not move further. What he saw immediately shocked him. Come here. He shouted, grabbing me by the scruff of the neck. "We need to run." "Let go." I screamed back, trying to break free from his grip. How can he say that when he needs to save Miss Song from these ignorant people? "Let me go," I said. "Look." The old man screamed, pointing somewhere back. Mutant insects began to flock to our noise. They were flying in a large group towards us. They looked towards those gathered and, buzzing, moved closer and closer every second. People immediately began to scream and run away as the insects began to attack them, diving from the air. "Arg, help." One of them screamed as soon as the legs of the mutant insect began to wrap around him. "Shout." Second. And the sting immediately dug into the back of the man running away. "Back." Another shouted stammeringly, waving a stick from side to side in an attempt to drive the mutant away from him. "Don't come near. Clean up." But this did not frighten the insect. It stood silently in front of him, tilting its head to the side and looking at the stupid little man. But before he could finish shouting the word he wanted to say, the insect immediately grabbed his head with its mouth. "Miss Dream," I exclaimed, looking for my partner in all this bacchanalia. "Where are you?" "Miss." I wanted to call her again, but immediately stopped. I saw her lying motionless on the ground and one of the diving mutant insects approaching her body. The girl curled up and breathed quickly after the stress she had experienced, not noticing anything, only occasionally twitching and trembling. The insect, in turn, looked at her and could not understand whether the creature that lay in front of her was alive or whether it needed to be immobilized as quickly as possible. Suddenly my gaze fell on the weapon lying next to me, which had recently been knocked out of the hands of the victim Miss Song. I immediately grabbed it and headed towards her in order to somehow help and prevent the vile insect from killing her. The mutant insect heard the sound when I grabbed the machine gun and immediately turned its massive head in my direction. I sat down, leaning on one knee, and immediately began to aim at the overgrown insect. Suddenly something caught my eye and I was a little distracted from the task that stood before me. I saw the same crowd of distraught people. They were hiding behind a creature, a man with the head of an insect, and shouting something. "Pastor, save us." They shouted, holding his hands. "Hey, take your hands off." Something was indignant in response, trying to escape from their grip. "Save us, please." People were screaming again. "The beetles don't know that we are at the same time with them." Those who had lost their minds shouted in one voice, clasping their hands in front of them, as if praying. "Pastor, explain to them. We are from the same tribe." I said, "Let me go." Something was indignant, still trying to break out of the human grip. "How will I explain this to them? They're insects. You said you had the power to communicate with them." People exclaimed in response to him. "Save us. You crazy idiots." He exclaimed, resisting with all his might the attacks of the people. "How can I talk to them? Stop pushing." It was all a lie. But it was too late. They released him, pushing him forward. And here he is, face to face with a mutant insect. "Damn." The man with the head of a beetle exclaimed, taken aback by what he saw. The people who had gone crazy and pushed him forward began to echo almost with one voice. "Oh gentlemen. Lord. Lord." And then they fell on their faces. The man in the insect mask immediately began to scream, taking out a pistol from the inside pocket of his jacket at that moment. The insect silently looked at this whole circus that was unfolding in its field of vision and only twitched its antennae once. Suddenly, something like a proboscis burst out of the mouth of the mutant insect, and these claws headed towards the masked man. They clicked and scarlet drops of blood immediately scattered in the air. The man stood there, holding a pistol in one hand, and in the other was not a Bible at all, but some kind of purse with a lock in the shape of a book. The purse immediately fell to the ground, and multicolored crisp bills jumped out of it into the air. Green, bright yellow with faces full of them. Due to the blow of a gentle breeze, the banknotes with the face of a man on some and with the face of a woman on others immediately began to spin in the air. People immediately ran into the scattered area, screaming loudly because of the fear that had run through them and dropping their weapons, which they themselves had made not so long ago. The insect turned around and glared menacingly in one direction. But there was only emptiness. I ran as fast as I could, with my weapon at the ready and with Miss Song throwing her arm over my shoulder. Breathing heavily and frequently due to the load and fast pace, I approached the road, which is occupied by abandoned cars lined up in a chain, passing some mini structure made of stripes that resembled a rocket. I bit my lower lip and, overcoming the pain in my muscles, tried to squeeze out all my strength in order to get to the place I needed. But I didn't have enough stamina, and soon I fell along with Miss Song onto the asphalt, painfully hitting my knees and hands. My leg. I whined stutteringly, holding my leg, which I pressed harder against the concrete masonry. It hurts so much. I cannot. My body was trembling from severe overexertion, and my muscles were constrained by unbearable pain. I couldn't stand another injection of pain and immediately screamed, unable to contain myself. Miss Song immediately crawled up to me and shouted, "Boss, pull yourself together. To at least somehow support me. Come on," she said, looking around, but I just whined in pain, clutching my legs. "Let's." I whined again and shouted out help. Suddenly, at the end of the escalator, which had already stopped forever, the same huge insect monsters appeared at the very top. Like Jack in the Box. "Miss Song, down." I immediately shouted when I saw them. "What?" The girl was taken aback. "Leave quickly," I exclaimed again. "Down the stairs. Let backward test together." The girl did not let up and began to grab me by the shoulders in an attempt to drag me with her. "I will help." I grabbed the machine gun so that I could be ready to shoot at any moment or divert all their attention to myself. But she took my arm and helped me get up, guiding me to the escalators that lead down. We stopped immediately as soon as we saw a familiar gray-haired man. He collected cylinders in a pile at the bottom of the stairs, and most likely they were filled with nothing more than gas. One by one, the metal cylinders rolled under his hands. Ding! Was heard as soon as they came into contact with what was already lying in the pile of those brought. He again touched each cylinder in turn, and immediately a subtle whistle began to be heard. Yes, he turned on the gas and apparently wanted to have a barbecue. Smart, smart. No. Wait. I exclaimed immediately, drawing his attention so that Miss Song and I would not end up as a seasoning for the main course. Don't light it until we get down. Shut up and come down already. He shouted back, looking in our direction. When it's necessary, I'll blow it up. I began to breathe quickly moving my brain, thinking about how to quickly get to the bottom, and so that the old man's plan would not be in vain. Without hesitation, I immediately grabbed Miss Song, who immediately almost squealed from such surprise. A little more and I would have attracted a lot of unnecessary attention. I sat her at a distance between the escalator railings and pushed her so that she went down as if on a slide. But alas, this did not happen without unnecessary shouting. Overcoming the pain, I also tried to climb onto this area. Unfortunately, at the wrong time, my body became a sack of potatoes. Somehow I succeeded and I also went down at a terrifying speed. The insect did not waste much time and immediately hurried after our heads, but about the stopped stairs. The other one, who stood next to the first one, only looked after its fellow without taking any action. Suddenly, as if sensing something was wrong, it began to chirp. And the three mutants, who wanted to hurry after the people after their brother, immediately stopped, looking back at what was apparently the main one among them. I quickly sank down among the cylinders, leaning on my legs, holding the machine gun. I almost fell from the poly, which pierced me with needles from bottom to top, when Miss Song immediately grabbed me, trying to help me move. "Hey!" I exclaimed, trying to at least lean on the gun. "Come on!" Miss Song exclaimed, pushing me. The cylinders continued to whistle, filling the floor with gas. They poured a substance onto the first rag they came across, or rather a sock, that would probably catch fire and initiate an explosion. The old man looked closely at the distance that was to the cylinders and seemed to be calculating something in his mind. Holding the sock, he seemed to ask a question. He was waiting for the guests in order to blow them up, but they were not observed. "Well?" he asked. "Where are they?" We also stood in tension and anticipation. Standing with the sock soaked through and the lighter ready, the man was still looking out for his future victims. Suddenly something tensed him, and he turned his attention to another descent from the upper floors. "Damn it," he swore mentally, "but not this. Down onto the platform." He immediately exclaimed out loud and rushed away. "Faster." We looked after him in disbelief. He set fire to the sock as he walked, still looking back. Swing. And the thing shrouded in fire immediately flew off into the distance. He aimed for an empty area between the columns. The gas was still coming out of the cylinders, creating a whistle. Gas was everywhere and filled every millimeter of the floor. The stairs were still empty, and the insects were in no hurry to attend our dinner party. Second. And then suddenly those whom we had been waiting for so long appeared. They did not appear on the escalator, but on another descent from the floors. Clever creatures. They saw a fire in the middle of the area in front of them and braked almost immediately, not understanding where the fire was coming from. But a little more and there was a loud explosion, spitting fire even onto the top floor, where the very first descent on the escalator began. Right to the nose of the quick-witted beetle. We were lower and only looked back at the sound of an explosion behind us. "This is the fourth line," I said, studying the route. "To get to Namian, you need to take the second one. This leads in the other direction." "Are you talking to me?" the old man asked, turning to me. "Crazy? I'm not from your company." "Hey," Miss Song called, sitting down next to me, "eat this and show me your leg." She didn't look good when you were sleeping. I just sat opposite her, holding the machine gun. So I ran to the pharmacy to get some medicine. The brunette spoke again. "They should help a little." "Thank you," I thanked her immediately, Miss Song. "And last time too." I took 2 blue and white capsules from her hands. "Come on." She only snorted in response. "You two risked your life to save me." Smiling, she said, "I will do anything for you." The gray-haired man stood at a distance from us, only listening out of the corner of his ear to what was happening. "What did you say?" the gray-haired man asked, immediately turning to Miss Song. "Did you go to the pharmacy? Alone?" He doubted her words. The feeling is not as if this is a mockery, but rather that it is apparently very dangerous there. He was surprised by his words. Yes. She finally muttered in response. "There is one here, right in the Seoul station." "Is something wrong?" The brunette did not understand such ardent interest. "How did you manage to come back from there unharmed?" said a new acquaintance, not taking his eyes off my partner. "Do you know why even these morons avoided that place? There are just a lot of infected people there." The gray-haired man explained, remembering that area. "They're all over the station." He spoke again, remembering a huge building with stained glass that turned the color of a swamp and slightly hunched people with eggs on their backs scurrying around the playground. That's why those suckers didn't stick their noses in there. But the girl only frowned and grunted in response, not taking her eyes off the strange familiar. "I don't know what you're talking about." She spoke as if nothing had happened. "I didn't meet any infected people there." "Hey," she called out to me again while I was quenching my thirst, "show me your leg." "Wait," the gray-haired man immediately turned to her again, heading closer to us. "I'm not done yet." Suddenly Miss Song grabbed the gun. She immediately reloaded it abruptly and pointed it at the gray-haired man. "Stay away," she said, aiming almost point blank. "Even though I'm a woman, I can stand up for myself. I am grateful to you for saving us. However, this does not mean," she said angrily through her teeth, "that you are in charge here." The gray-haired man just stared at her in silence, without saying a word and not moving from his place anymore. I tried to get up and break their stupid quarrel. A quarrel that no one really needs at the moment. "Hey, don't do that. He means us no harm." "But your leg." Miss Song immediately ran up to me. "She's fine," I said. "Nothing is broken. I took a painkiller a minute ago." "Don't be stubborn," the brunette exclaimed in response. "Let me see, it might be broken." "Even so," I said, not even looking in her direction. "There's nothing we can do about it. On one of the walls there is a small box of a red shade. Portable emergency light source. Says the inscription on it." I took one of the flashlights. And then she took Miss Song under her arm, and we went on from the dead point. "Let's go on the rails," I suggested it right away. "Wait." Suddenly there was a sound behind me. This was addressed to us by a new acquaintance with whose fate we were connected by the current cataclysm. "Why did you want to get to Namian?" the man immediately asked. "Evacuation center," I said in response, without turning around at his voice. "My wife and daughter can be there." The man seemed to grunt in response. "An evacuation center?" We were walking along the rails, making some noise. Clink. There was a sound and bounced off the walls of the subway tunnel. I walked, leaning on one side on Miss Song, on the other on the machine. And most likely it was the second that created this sound that broke the silence. We suddenly stopped and immediately looked back without looking back. "Well," muttered our new acquaintance, who was walking peacefully behind. "I'd better get there too if I want to survive. Let's walk along the tracks to Shinyensang station." The brunette spoke to Tom in response. "There's a hospital nearby." We were taken aback and were afraid to breathe, paying attention to the edge of the rails passing under us. Clattering along the metal beams with a multitude of long legs ran none other than a centipede, but of the same large size as mutants above the ground. Miss Song immediately clenched her teeth, looking at this monster, and could not say a word, only mentally began to ask that this monster would go away from them faster. Come on. She spoke as if nothing had happened, as soon as the monster disappeared into the darkness behind our backs. It's still safer here than upstairs. And we set off again, breaking the silence with the sound of the gun touching the rails. 3 silhouettes were walking forward, shining flashlights in front of them. I began to breathe frequently due to muscle tension and long walking sleep from carrying ballast in the form of me. And the gray-haired man calmly followed, without straying from the path. Calm and measured. He was still following us, directing a stream of light from the flashlight at our feet. Suddenly he was taken aback, seeing something and stopped. Stop, freeze. He immediately ordered us. A thin thread artfully stretched a couple of centimeters above the rails. By detours, it was attached to the ring on a small grenade attached to a stick. What's it? I immediately asked, amazed at the clever mechanism. It seems, the old man said, inspecting the trap, that someone up there doesn't like visitors. Hands up. Suddenly a scream rang out, cutting through the oppressive silence. If you twitch, I shoot. Back to back. Back to back. Again there was a cry of someone's voice that was unknown to us. Wait. I immediately exclaimed, raising my hand up. We're civilians. We don't know the password. There is only an old man, a woman and a wounded man. I shouted into the darkness of the receding subway track. Don't shoot. Suddenly, a flashlight shone sharply in our direction. So bright and unusual after the darkness and the dim light of our flashlights. A couple of soldiers peeked out of the passages on the sides, at the ready with a gun. They also had a camouflage uniform and the inscription Unity on their helmets. Hey. Put the gun on the ground. One of them exclaimed again. This is my crutch, I began to retort, covering my face with my palm from the bright light. I can't stand without it. Put it on the ground. The soldier shouted again. My argument had no weight for him. Without thinking twice, I immediately put the gun on the ground. I was still holding the machine gun, but I put my other palm up. I immediately let out a kind of sob from the pain that appeared as I changed my support to the newly sore leg. Boss. Miss Song immediately exclaimed and rushed to my aid, while the first soldier squinted at the second. How are you there? One of them asked for the sake of decency, most likely. I'll remove the trap. They approached us while I was writhing on the rails from the cutting pain. Hey, the second soldier exclaimed when another soldier looked out from around the bend, report to the platoon commander. There are 3 civilians here. The gray-haired man looked at the military that we met and just chuckled. They're just boys. The metro station we arrived at was numbered 429 and named Sinyensen. Blankets are spread on the floor at the station. Couples with children live here. About 5 adults, 10 children, including a baby. We passed by them, looking at the looks of those who had tasted the pain of this life. A life that has put this heavy burden on their still unprepared shoulders. I was surprised by the amount that could be saved. It's not enough, but it's something more than nothing. But I also tried to look for my family, whose salvation I had hoped for and had been waiting to meet them for so long. But I didn't find them. Excuse me, Corporal. I immediately turned to the military man walking in front of us. Is it possible to contact people outside from here? Is there any way to get through to my family? The soldier who led us was immediately puzzled. Well. He hesitated immediately, and the facial expression changed to sympathy. It won't work right now. Is it that bad? I immediately asked. What did you say? There was a shout somewhere ahead and we were immediately distracted by it and looked ahead. We can't leave this place. The man shouted in the face of one of the military. Sir, as I said. It can be seen that a man in a military uniform began to explain in a new way. We're cut off. Said the man with the inscription Unity on the helmet. We're still holding them back, but we're running out of ammo. We need to take another safe shelter while we still have something to shoot with. It's impossible. The civilian started shouting again, without slowing down his tone. There are only old people and children here. It's not as easy as you think. How far can they go? We have to wait for the rescue team. The civilian spoke again, while the military man looked away from his face. Can't you contact anyone? Of the last hopes, the man asked the military more calmly. Answer me. But again there was only silence. We silently watched this picture, taken aback by what we heard. Not even an army is capable of defeating bugs? The man spoke again, still shaking the air. Are you really that useless? That's not so. Finally, I found the soldiers answering words and gave my voice. If there are bullets, then we can destroy them. In fact, our division has advanced all the way to Jongno. But there were too many of them. We were outnumbered. The tank moved slowly along the city road while a huge swarm of insects began to fill the space of the sky. No matter how much we killed, we still couldn't beat them. We were pushed back and surrounded. Told the military. Our division was dispersed and only small isolated groups remained of it. We have built fortifications for the survivors, but they won't last long. We need to get out of here as soon as possible. But why? The gray-haired man was puzzled, looking around at the people who lived here in the whole situation. It's easier to defend here. According to the reports of the patrollers, the military said again, the bugs are guarding this building. Two men in military uniforms on the surface are watching the entrance to the building over which two huge mutant individuals are flying. They arrive more often and stay there longer and longer. Bugs will come before the rescuers. The man spoke and clenched his teeth. Sweat could be seen rolling down his face, and his body was shaking with a small tremor. We need to get out of here. I closed my eyes and raised my head in the hope of digesting everything I heard from the mouth of the military. Sorry, sir. Suddenly they turned to the military man who was leading us, and we immediately turned around with him. The children came up to us. Two. The girl is slightly taller with a square, and the second is shorter with short hair gathered in two small ponytails. You are welcome. Take. The girl babbled that she was a head taller and held out a small bun sealed in a package. My mom and dad. Babbled the baby, looking away. The bugs took it. Please, she begged, still holding out the bread, save my mom and dad. Please, sir. A man in a military uniform with the inscription Unity on his helmet was taken aback. Sweat immediately broke out on his face, and he couldn't say anything back to this little girl. We both stood in silence, not knowing what to say to such a request, when you know for sure that their parents are dead, but you will not directly tell this to such a fragile baby. Miss Song was standing in the toilet by a row of sinks and rinsing her hands under a stream of cool water. Having collected more water in the palm of her hand, she immediately washed, rinsed her face, pressing the collected water to it and not letting go, enjoying the coolness of clean water and freshness. On the tip of her finger, she squeezed out a little ointment with the name Bushidan. The tube is in principle small. The baby is about 10 grams. She put it on her neck. After applying the ointment, she put on her jacket and, taking her backpack, left the toilet. I was sitting on the floor, leaning on the cool surface of the wall. They helped me with my leg by making a homemade tire, so to speak. I was still confused because before my eyes, there was still that scene with bread and small children who were asking for help. I stood up abruptly, overcoming the pain that came over me. Sit down and don't do anything stupid. The old man's voice rang out behind me. The soldiers took away our weapons. Are you going to fight with your bare fists? A white-haired man snorted, reasoning over the current situation. You have a better chance of survival here. I stopped right there, looking down at the floor, and Miss Song took my hand from the left, looking puzzled and not understanding what could have happened. Sorry. I said. We approached the place where the soldiers themselves settled, a little away from the civilians under a large sign free haircut. There were also wooden boxes stuffed with something, weapons, some cylinders, so to speak, suitcases assembled. They immediately looked back in our direction. You said, I said, that we were going to leave. But where? The situation for today is not clear. One of the military immediately explained. But if everything stays that way, then we are going to the nearest center Anyang. The soldier explained, and it was as if I was hit on the head with a butt from his words. How? I immediately asked him. Insects choose tall buildings for housing. The soldier immediately explained. Therefore, we will cross the Donjak Bridge and head to Mount Gwanak. A guy in a military uniform immediately explained. Following the road and being under the cover of buildings. Wait, is that a flamethrower? The old man immediately asked a question, seeing an interesting thing among everything in this place. Yes, it is. The soldier spoke. Why don't you use it? The gray-haired man was puzzled. He's better than automatons. The fire is too strong. The soldier muttered, looking down. Probably, this is due to the increased oxygen content in the atmosphere. The flamethrower heats up and melts quickly. The soldier explained. But it's still usable, right? The old man did not calm down. There were cases, one of the soldiers said, when they exploded. Therefore, we are forbidden to use them. Corporal Jian. Suddenly a soldier came up and called. The other one was surprised. Hey. The first one started. The second one said something inaudible to us, which caused the first one to immediately raise his voice. What? Where is he? We looked in their direction, not understanding at all what had happened, but we didn't say anything. In one, two soldiers were talking through an underground passage, while a third with his arms bent at the elbows behind his back was sitting on the floor, touching the floor surface with his head. "Hey, you," one of the soldiers exclaimed and slapped another savory slap in the face, "muzzle to the floor, now," he ordered in a raised voice. "I'm sorry, sir." The second one stammered. "I said face to the floor." The first one exclaimed again. "Move it, bitch." "I'm sorry, sir." "Corporal Jean," came a voice behind the soldier, who was slapping his cheeks and demanding obedience. "What are you doing there? Stop fucking kicking." Only Corporal Jean exclaimed in response. "Because of you, the seniors have to do all the work." He was still loudly indignant. "Do you think this is how it should be? They're just resting after their shift." The soldier who came began to defend in raised tones. "It's still early. Stop talking." The corporal snorted. "They allow themselves to do this only because you are a commander, like a bullet out of shit." "Wait." The soldier answered him in response. "Why did you leave the post?" he asked immediately, pointing to his wristwatch. "I needed to take a piss." The corporal muttered, waving it away. "On Cy Street." The soldier who was talking to him couldn't stand it. "You should be on duty right now." "Like I fucking care." The corporal snorted in response. We went down to the noise and began to observe the whole unfolding picture. I only had 2 months of this shit left. The corporal was muttering to himself, going somewhere, when suddenly he was immediately stopped by the shoulder. "Shut up and go back to your post. Now. This is an order," shouted the corporal, chastising. "Go upstairs." But the corporal just gave the middle finger and walked away as if nothing had happened, holding his gun. Miss Song and I looked at it as something unimaginable. This shouldn't happen. And this is our military, which should protect civilians. The old man crossed his arms over his chest. It's like it's nothing new to him. Although it is age, it is not surprising that he managed to see a lot. At the post on the street there was a truck, in the back of which stood one of the soldiers. The other one is not far from the first one, but on the ground, not in transport. Suddenly, one of them saw something and was surprised. "Hey! There!" The soldier who was in the back exclaimed and pointed somewhere to the side. A walking infected man with a bunch of eggs on his back was slowly but surely heading towards them. "This is one of them." They exclaimed in response to the sentry, and he immediately began to aim. "Shoot." But suddenly, the infected person raised his hand and screamed as if nothing had happened. "Wait. Don't shoot. I'm normal," he shouted, sweating with excitement. "Help." The guards were immediately taken aback and broke away from the sights, not believing their eyes. "What?" exclaimed the soldier heading for the sentry. "Has one of the infected soldiers returned?" he asked immediately, not believing the information he had just heard. "Whose is it?" "I have no idea," the informer rapped out. "Probably someone from the 4th squad." Not far from them, soldiers were crowding, discussing and examining something violently. They stood so tightly in a ring that nothing was clear from afar. "Please," the newcomer begged, sweating with excitement, "take this stuff off me." "You are welcome." "Medic, take them off." One of the soldiers turned to a guy in the same uniform, but there was a distinctive feature on the bridge of his nose, namely glasses. "What?" Stammering, the so-called medic was taken aback. "How? I cannot." He still stammered. "Then I'll try with a knife." Suddenly someone spoke the same way from the crowd. "Cut it already." There was an exclamation in response. We approached the soldiers huddled around the victim and began to try to see what had happened. What interested them all so much? "Hey," a new acquaintance called out to us and pulled us by the shoulders. "Come here." "What?" I immediately asked, not understanding what he wanted from us. "Now." He only spoke in response. The man took us away from them, looking around strangely. We approached the so-called mini-military warehouse while everyone was distracted. There was a submachine gun and still that flamethrower that once attracted the attention of this old man. "Take it," he said immediately. "What? What for?" I was surprised, not understanding such a mean act on his part. "They still don't know," said a new acquaintance, "how to use it, so we take it for ourselves. And we're leaving now." "We will die," the old man said, looking around, "if we stay with them." "Transfer civilians across the bridge?" he snorted. "They won't last 5 minutes. It is better to move in small groups." He continued in the same way, and his aura seemed to be pressing on me. It's much safer that way. Let's go. Faster. But I couldn't make up my mind to take such a step because I still had that little girl in front of my eyes with the bread still packed in her hands. How her little hands pull him in our direction and she begs us to do something for her. No, I can't do that. I finally said in response. What? The gray-haired man was surprised by my answer. Don't you want to go to that center? Of course I want to, but this does not mean that I will do anything for the sake of survival. That was my answer. Miss Song looked at us and didn't say a word without breaking our dialogue. But my words obviously struck the girl. The man made a grimace and sighed with displeasure. It's not easy with you. A place in one of the corridors where the soldiers still clung to the infected. Okay, finally the so-called medic decided, still sweating from the strain, let's try to cut it off. He was holding a sharp knife. Turn around. But suddenly the infected person seemed to enter a state of hypnosis and raised his left hand up. What are you doing? The medic was surprised. I said turn around. He was taken aback before the action of the infected. Not raise your hands. Suddenly, with a clang, some metal part flew down. And when they raised their eyes to the raised hand of the infected, they were horrified. The infected person was holding a grenade in his hand. K400 hand fragmentation grenade, plastic composite substance of type B, a fragmentation grenade of remote action. The explosion occurs 4 to 6 seconds after removing the pressure lever. The radius of continuous damage is 5 meters, the radius of possible damage is up to 35 meters. Back! Someone shouted right there. Many immediately rushed into the scattering. Someone immediately began to hold the infected person's hand, another immediately rushed to the grenade with a helmet. A loud explosion. And we were immediately shaken. What is it now? I said, looking at where we were not so long ago. From around the corner, only clouds of smoke rose into the air and some kind of whistling. Outside, they also heard a loud explosion and wondered what could have happened there. And the ground immediately began to shake for a while. Is that something that exploded down there? The guards immediately exclaimed, paying attention to the entrance to the subway. Hey, look. The one who was standing in the back of the car immediately pointed somewhere to the side. It is not surprising that a loud explosion was heard, and a crowd of walking infected immediately began to head in their direction. Hundreds, maybe thousands of walking time bombs that can cause mutant insects at any moment. They were armed, and the devil knows what they would get into an infected head. We run to the subway. One of the guards immediately shouted. Let's get out of here. And the infected, noticing them, immediately accelerated their step in their direction.